Hey guys, tonight we begin with a world where your breath clouds in front of your face the moment you exhale, even though you're inside your own home. The medieval night is settling, and you're about to discover what cold truly means. You probably won't survive this, but let's try anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across a packed dirt floor, the ground so hard and chilled it feels like a frozen pond beneath your bare feet. The walls around you are thin sticks smeared with mud, straw, and dung, and every gust of winter air finds a crack to squeeze through. You pull your woolen cloak tighter, but it does little. The hearth in the middle of the room spits and hisses a weak flame, fighting against a tide of icy darkness. The fire is your lifeline. If it dies, so do you. You huddle closer, smoke stinging your eyes as it struggles to rise out through a gap in the roof. Chimneys aren't common yet, so the air inside is thick with fumes. It's irritating, yes, but also strangely protective. The smoke drives away fleas, lice, and sometimes even rats. You cough into your sleeve and try to ignore the acrid taste. At least it means the pests suffer too. Historians still argue whether the average peasant accepted this smoky atmosphere willingly or simply had no choice but to endure it night after night. The cold creeps in from everywhere, through the walls, under the roof, even from the dirt below. You sit cross-legged by the fire, rubbing your hands together, listening to the wind howl like an angry spirit outside. In wealthier homes, floors are layered with straw or rushes, but here the ground is nearly bare. You can feel frost nibbling at your toes as if the earth itself wants to claim your warmth. Sometimes villagers add new straw on top of the old, creating layers of damp, decaying vegetation. It stinks, but it offers insulation. Modern carpet padding suddenly sounds luxurious by comparison. Behind you, the bedding is nothing more than a sack of hay with a blanket of rough wool. You lie down the straw, crunching, poking through the fabric to scratch your back. Fleas jump across your skin, unwelcome companions that thrive in the warmth of your body. There's no mattress, no pillow, just an itchy pile that must be endured. Imagine trying to get comfortable while one side of you freezes and the other sweats from lying too close to the hearth. It's less sleep, more survival exercise. To make matters worse, food is scarce. Tonight's meal was gruel oats boiled with water until they became a gray paste. It fills your stomach, but offers little energy to fight the cold. Tomorrow, maybe some bread baked with bits of rye and barley, dense and sour. For those with means, meat or cheese might appear once a week, but for you, a full belly is rare. Malnutrition weakens your body, making every winter chill more dangerous. It's no wonder so many never live to see old age. And yet there are tricks. You sleep with others, family, neighbors, even animals, because body heat is the only free insulation. Chickens rustle in the rafters, a goat shifts near the door, and you can hear the rhythmic snorting of a pig not far from your bed. The smell is unbearable, but you've grown used to it. At least the animals add a degree or two of warmth. People pack together, like logs on a fire, each person a shield against the freezing air. Personal space doesn't exist. Survival trumps comfort. Sometimes you wake in the middle of the night to stoke the embers. Letting the fire die is not an option. Matches don't exist. Flint and steel are unreliable, especially with frozen fingers. So you practice fire banking carefully, covering the glowing coals with ash so they survive until morning. If you're lucky, you'll poke at the gray mound at sunrise and see a faint red glow. If not, the day begins with bitter cold and despair. Families argue over the best fire banking methods, each swearing by their own little tricks. It's the medieval version of debating barbecue recipes, only the stakes are higher. You're fighting for life itself. You glance upward at the thatched roof. It sags under the weight of snow-dripping water, in places inviting birds and insects inside. On stormy nights, the wind rips through the gaps like a thief stealing what little warmth you've gathered. And when you roll over on your straw sack, you hear the squeak of a mouse scurrying across the floor. Privacy doesn't exist. Even your sleep is a communal activity with vermin livestock and siblings all sharing the same space. Think about it today. We complain when the thermostat dips a couple of degrees or when a draft sneaks in through a poorly sealed window. In this world, the entire house is one giant draft. Every night is a gamble against frostbite. You would trade all the Netflix and soft blankets in the world for just one night in a heated room. The reality check is sobering. Waking up alive in the morning is not guaranteed. For peasants, opening your eyes after a night in that frozen, smoky, crowded hut is nothing short of a miracle. Children and the elderly are especially vulnerable, and families quietly expect losses during the harshest months. When someone does survive, it's worth a celebration. Maybe an extra slice of bread, if you have it. And yet, life goes on. You find ways to laugh, to share stories around the fire, to gossip with neighbors about whose goat broke into the bread bin this time. It's grim, yes, but not entirely hopeless. Humans adapt even when the odds are stacked against them. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, with smoke burning your eyes, straw scratching your back, and frost creeping through the cracks, you clutch your thin blanket tighter and whisper a silent prayer. If you're lucky, you'll wake up with all your fingers and toes intact. And if not, well, at least you won't have to face another medieval winter night. You shuffle out of your straw bed and stretch through the movement does little to ease the constant ache of cold. Morning light sneaks through the cracks in the walls, illuminating faces that look older than their years. Then someone yawns, exposing a mouth that is a battlefield of decay teeth, blackened, broken, and missing. In the medieval world, a smile isn't a sign of joy. It's often a grim reminder of pain. You reach up to touch your own jaw, half expecting a tooth to loosen at the pressure. Toothaches are not just common, they're inevitable. The medieval diet, heavy on coarse bread, often filled with grit from grinding stones, wears teeth down like sandpaper. Imagine chewing pebbles with every meal, and you'll understand why mouths deteriorate so quickly. And when a tooth begins to rot, the suffering is relentless. Historians still argue whether some peasants tried herbal remedies first, or whether they simply prayed until the pain was unbearable enough to demand action. That action, of course, was rarely gentle. Dentistry doesn't exist in any modern sense. There are no clean clinics, no sterile tools, no polite dentists humming while they work. Instead, you're at the mercy of the local barber surgeon, a man who might cut hair in the morning, drain blood at noon, and yank teeth by evening. He approaches with iron pincers, rough hands, and zero anesthesia. The procedure is brutal. One strong grip, one wrenching twist, and your tooth is out, along with a piece of your gum if you're unlucky. Your scream echoes through the village, joined by the laughter of children who know they're next someday. And if you think losing a tooth ends the nightmare, think again. Infection lurks at every corner. Without antibiotics, a simple abscess can swell your face grotesquely, heat your body with fever, and sometimes even kill you. All from a single tooth. People die not of great wounds, but of rotting molars and pus-filled gums. A gruesome fate for something you barely notice in the mirror today. Some try home remedies. First clove oil for numbing garlic, pressed into aching gums, or even a poultice made of herbs and wine. But desperation breeds stranger ideas. Records mention frog fat rubbed onto cheeks, or charms whispered by so-called healers. A priest might mutter a blessing, promising divine relief if you fast or offer prayers. Meanwhile, the pain gnaws deeper, a steady throb that keeps you awake in the frozen dark. Teeth are currency in this world. A full set of strong white teeth is rare, almost enviable. By middle age, most peasants are half toothless. Their smiles, ragged, their words slurred by gaps. Children suffer too malnutrition and poor hygiene, rotting their baby teeth before they fall out naturally. It is not unusual for a 10-year-old to look like a toothless elder. When someone manages to keep a single healthy tooth well into adulthood, it's almost worth celebrating like a relic. You poke at the remains of breakfast, a hunk of hard bread, barely softened by dipping it in ale. You gnaw carefully, wincing each time a sharp edge brushes a sore spot. You know others who can no longer chew at all, surviving on thin broths and mashed turnips. Without dentures, without soft modern foods, they simply waste away. In some ways, tooth decay is as deadly as any sword. Imagine a wedding. The bride lifts her veil. Her lips tremble into a smile, and instead of pearly white, she reveals jagged stumps and blackened gums. Romance wilts quickly in the face of rot. Medieval poets praise rosy cheeks and golden hair, but they avoid writing about the smell of infected mouths. The stench of decay is everywhere, unavoidable, woven into the very air you breathe in a crowded feast hall. If you lived, then you'd guard your teeth like treasure. But brushing doesn't exist. Not really. At best, people rub their teeth with twigs or linen cloth. Powdered charcoal is sometimes used, gritty and foul-tasting, but effective at scouring. Wealthier nobles dab honey or mint onto their gums, hoping to freshen their breath. Ironically, honey only feeds the bacteria, accelerating the very rot they fear. In truth, no one escapes. Even kings suffer agonizing abscesses, their physicians helpless. Think of the irony today. We pay fortunes for whitening strips, braces, and implants. Back then, people simply prayed not to die from their jaw swelling shut. And when the pain struck, the only real cure was courage or madness enough to let someone yank the tooth from your skull. You rub your jaw again, feeling phantom pain as you imagine it. The fire sputters behind you, and outside, the icy wind continues to moan. Hunger gnaws at your stomach, but toothache might gnaw harder. In this medieval world, survival isn't just about warmth or food. It's about whether you can keep chewing long enough to see another winter. You sit by the smoky hearth again, clutching a wooden bowl filled with what passes for dinner. It's not the taste that unsettles you, it's the crunch. Every bite carries a gritty edge, as if sand has been stirred into your stew. That's not an accident. The bread and porridge of the medieval world are laced with tiny shards of stone from grinding flour on rough millstones. Your teeth scrape, your jaw aches, and you wonder how much enamel you've lost already. Food is a necessity, not a pleasure. Peasant diets rarely wander beyond bread pottage and whatever scraps can be gathered. Pottage is the catch-all dish, a watery stew of beans, cabbage, or oats, simmering endlessly in a pot blackened by smoke. Every day it tastes the same, and every day you eat it again. Sometimes it's bulked out with onions or garlic, sometimes with a bone boiled so long that it has given up all hope and most of its flavor. And yet it's not just blandness you endure. Bugs are unavoidable guests at the table. At grain stores teem with weevils and beetles, their tiny bodies ground into the flour along with everything else. You don't bother picking them out. You probably wouldn't have enough to eat if you did. They add crunch protein and a reminder that life here is less about appetite and more about survival. Historians still argue whether medieval people even noticed the insects, or whether they accepted them as casually as you accept crumbs on a table. The smell of your meal is heavy earthy and faintly sour. Bread is dark dense and sour tasting from rye or barley. White bread is a luxury reserved for the nobility, something most peasants may never taste in their lives. For you, the loaves are so heavy they could double as weapons. Sometimes the bread is stretched with fillers, ground beans, acorns, or even chalk to make it last longer. Too much chalk, and you're not eating food at all. You're gnawing mortar. Water is risky, so ale accompanies nearly every meal. Even children drink it weak, though it is. But ale does nothing to improve the meal itself. The combination of stale bread, bitter cabbage, and a foamy sip of beer leaves your stomach heavy and your mouth desperate for something fresh. A piece of fruit would be a treasure, an orange unimaginable. And yet, on rare feast days, you glimpse what the wealthy enjoy. A roasted goose skin glistening with fat. A table laden with venison-spiced wine and custard sweetened with imported sugar. You stare hungrily from the sidelines, your own bowl of pottage cooling in your hands. Nobles gorge themselves on meat 3 times a day, while you chew bean paste until your jaw tires. The divide between rich and poor is as wide as the church nave, and you stand firmly on the wrong side of it. But even noble food hides dangers. Meat is often salted beyond recognition to preserve it, then boiled to soften the toughness. Fish may arrive at a castle already reeking, but it is served anyway, with spices to mask the rot. Spices, pepper, cinnamon, saffron aren't just luxury. They're camouflage. They tell guests, yes, this meat has traveled too far and too long, but eat it anyway. You spoon another mouthful of pottage, closing your eyes against the bitterness. The taste is dull, but your stomach welcomes the warmth. Some peasants survive on this gruel for months at a time, dreaming of variety they'll never taste. Malnutrition is common scurvy, silently rots, gums, rickets, bends bones. Children grow frail on diets that fill bellies, but starve bodies. You might not notice the lack of vitamins until your teeth loosen or your bones ache in the cold. Now picture yourself at a feast in a crowded hall. Flickering torchlight casts shadows across trestle tables, trenchers of bread serving as plates. People tear at hunks of greasy meat, with their hands tossing bones to the dogs beneath the table. There are no forks, no napkins, only fingers wiped on tunics or shared cloths. The smell is overwhelming, meat sweat smoke and the sour tang of ale. Somewhere, someone coughs into the communal salt bowl. You dip your bread in it anyway. If all this sounds bleak, you're right. But for medieval peasants, food is not about flavor. It is fuel, plain and simple. It keeps you alive through another frozen night, even if it wears down your teeth and fills your gut with grit. You dream of sweetness, of freshness of fruit, that doesn't make your jaw ache. But dreaming is all you can do. Tonight you scrape your bowl, clean picking up the last grains of barley with your fingers. Hunger gnaws, but the meal is over. You sigh, stomach half satisfied, jaw sore from chewing. Tomorrow will bring the same. A new pot of pottage, a loaf of bread like a stone, and the unshakable crunch of dirt between your teeth. Welcome to dining in the Middle Ages. You sit cross-legged by the embers, scratching at your skin, which smells faintly of sweat smoke and livestock. A thought creeps into your mind. When was the last time you bathed? You search your memory, but give up. It could have been months. In the medieval world, water is not a friend. It is a danger, a luxury, and sometimes a joke. Bathing is rare. In villages, streams and ponds are used for washing clothes, livestock, and sometimes corpses. You hesitate before stepping into the same water. The risk is obvious. Water carries disease more efficiently than almost anything else. Historians still argue whether peasants avoided bathing because they understood this or because hauling enough water was simply too exhausting to justify. Either way, most choose to stay dirty, masking odor with herbs or heavy clothing. When you finally do wash, the experience is far from refreshing. You step into a wooden tub filled with lukewarm water that's been carried in buckets from a nearby well. It takes hours to fill, so the entire household uses the same bath. You may go first if you're lucky. If not, the water is already cloudy with dirt, sweat, and hair floating in it. By the time the last child is dunked, the bath resembles soup more than cleanliness. Soap, as you know, it doesn't exist. There are crude substitutes, ash mixed with animal fat, creating a lye-heavy sludge that burns more than it cleans. If you're wealthy, you might afford perfumed oils or imported soaps from the East, but for the average person, a scrub with rough cloth or sand has to suffice. Clean skin comes at the cost of raw, irritated flesh. You rub until you're red, then wrap yourself again in the same unwashed tunic. Public bathhouses do exist in towns, and for a brief moment they feel like a miracle. Steam rises, voices echo, and bodies sink into shared tubs. Men and women sometimes bathe together to the horror of later moralists. But bathhouses earn reputations beyond cleanliness. They become centers of gossip, relaxation, and occasionally vice. The church frowns on them, declaring that nudity and temptation lurk in every steamy corner. Many bathhouses eventually close, leaving filth to reclaim the streets. Imagine stepping into one of those bathhouses, a candlelit hall water, sloshing steam blurring outlines of strangers. You lower yourself and sighing as heat soothes your frozen limbs. Then you notice the floating scum, the faint smell of mildew, and the realization that 50 others have soaked here before you. Cleanliness is an illusion. The comfort fades quickly when you remember that warm water is also the perfect breeding ground for disease. For the poor, washing is more ritual than hygiene. A splash on the face before church, a rinse of hands before meals, and perhaps feet washed at night. Entire bodies might go unwashed for months. Instead, people disguise odor with herbs, rubbing rosemary or lavender on skin-hanging sachets of mint around the neck. It doesn't remove the stench, but it masks it. Think of it as the medieval version of spraying deodorant over sweaty gym clothes. And yet, nobles face the same dilemma. Their castles have chambers with tub servants to haul water perfumes to dab behind the ears. But even royalty cannot escape the fundamental problem. Stagnant water is dangerous. Kings and queens often smell just as pungent as peasants. though with a layer of rose oil or musk attempting to disguise it. A courtier once complained that perfumes mixed with sweat created a stench worse than either alone. Imagine a royal hall, heavy with incense and unwashed bodies, all pretending that nobody notices. You scratch your arm again, remembering the last bath you endured icy river water that left you shivering for hours. You came out feeling cleaner, but also convinced you might die of the chill. Warmth is precious, and sacrificing it for temporary freshness feels foolish. You pull your cloak tighter, telling yourself dirt is just another layer of protection. Of course, dirt is also disease. Lice burrow in hair fleas, bite through clothing, and skin infections spread like wildfire. Children scratch until they bleed. Adults carry sores that never heal. Without soap, without antiseptic cleanliness, is not about health. It's about survival of the strong. Those who endure the filth live on. Those who don't fade quietly into the statistics of medieval life. You laugh bitterly, thinking of modern complaints, a cold shower, a broken hot water heater, a missed shampoo day. In this world, one bath a year is considered plenty, and too much washing is believed to weaken the body. Doctors even warn that pores opened by warm water invite sickness inside. Dirt, ironically, is thought to protect you. So tonight, you curl up again on your straw bed, unwashed, smoky, and itching. You dream of warm showers, scented soap, and clean towels. But when you wake, you'll splash your face with icy well water, rub your cloak against your arms, and carry on. For in the Middle Ages, the choice is simple stink and survive, or risk bathing and regret it. You stir awake with a groan clutching your head as if an unseen hammer is pounding inside your skull. Illness is constant. Earaches, fevers, and strange swellings that never seem to go away. And when you finally drag yourself to the village healer, the answer is almost always the same. You need to bleed. Bloodletting is the cure of choice for nearly every ailment. Headache, bleed. Fever, bleed. Stomach cramps, definitely bleed. The belief rests on the idea of balancing humors, the four fluids that supposedly govern your body: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much of one, and sickness strikes. To restore balance, physicians argue blood must be drained. Historians still argue whether some doctors sincerely believed in this method, or whether it was simply a convenient way to look busy while patients suffered. The tools are crude but terrifyingly effective. A scalpel, a sharp lancet, or even a leech pressed against your skin until it latches and sucks. The barber surgeon who cut hair yesterday and pulled a tooth last week now ties your arm tight with a cloth and makes a small incision. Warm blood flows into a bowl, the sight both horrifying and strangely routine. People expect it. Some even insist on it, convinced the procedure keeps them alive. But not everyone survives. Too much bloodletting weakens the already fragile. Children faint, the elderly collapse, and some never rise again. Imagine losing half a liter of blood in a world where your daily diet barely sustains you. Strength drains from your body, your vision darkens, and the cure becomes a death sentence. And yet families line up clutching pennies to pay for the chance. Hope is worth the risk. Leeches offer a gentler version, if by gentler you mean slow, slimy, and unsettling. The creatures wriggle against your skin before sinking tiny teeth into flesh. You lie still shuddering while they drink your blood. In wealthier households, jars of leeches are kept like medicine bottles. Servants retrieve one, press it onto the master's arm, and wait until it falls off bloated and satisfied. Some nobles even name their leeches, treating them like foul little pets that keep them balanced. And when bleeding fails, the physician prescribes purging, inducing vomiting, or diarrhea with herbs. Again, the goal is to rid the body of excess humors. You clutch your stomach, retching into a wooden bucket, wondering how this could possibly make you better. Yet for centuries, this was cutting-edge medicine. The smell of iron lingers in the air, sharp and metallic, as though death itself is close by. You hold your arm wrapped in a rag, the wound stinging the room, spinning. Outside, life goes on. Children chase chickens, women stir pots, men swing axes in the woods. But inside, you wonder if you'll survive the night. Oddly, some recover, whether by coincidence, natural healing, or sheer luck. Patients occasionally rise from their beds, declaring the treatment successful. Stories spread, reinforcing the faith. The barber surgeon nods sagely, pocketing his fee, and prepares for the next victim. Success is loud, failure is buried quietly. Picture a noble hall where a physician recommends bleeding the king for his melancholy. Courtiers whisper approval, even as the monarch slumps pale and exhausted in his chair. Nobody dares question the wisdom of tradition. To them, science has spoken. To you, it looks like slow torture wrapped in authority. The modern mind recoils. Today you pop an aspirin, sip some water, and lie down. Back then, the solution is to weaken yourself further and pray your body somehow fights through. You can't help but laugh darkly at the irony medicine meant to save lives often hastened death. So tonight, as you cradle your aching arm, you wonder if you'll live to see another dawn. Blood pools and the dirt leeches wriggle in jars, and the smell of sickness never leaves the room. In the Middle Ages, health is not about healing. It is about surviving the cure. You wake with a parched throat, your lips cracked from the cold night air. Instinctively, you reach for water, but then you stop. In the medieval world, water is the enemy. It's cloudy sour, often full of things you'd rather not name. A sip could leave you doubled over for days or dead by week's end. So instead, you reach for the safer option, beer. Yes, beer. Or ale, to be precise, weak, cloudy, barely alcoholic by modern standards. Even children drink it daily. It is safer than water because the brewing process, even without understanding germs, kills off some of the nastier surprises lurking in streams and wells. Boiling the mash, fermenting it, and storing it in barrels makes ale the medieval version of bottled water. Historians still argue whether peasants recognized this as science or simply noticed that ale drinkers lived longer than water drinkers. You lift a wooden mug, take a swallow, and grimace. The taste is flat sour, sometimes faintly moldy if the brewer rushed the process. It quenches thirst, but barely. The texture is heavy, almost grainy with flecks of yeast still floating. This isn't the crisp golden drink you might enjoy today. It's liquid bread, meant to fill your stomach as much as hydrate. You burp, wiping froth from your chin, then pass the mug to the child beside you. Nobody blinks. It's breakfast. Water sources are treacherous. Wells are often too shallow, tainted by latrines dug nearby. Streams carry waste from upstream farms, dead animals rotting unseen beneath the surface. Even in towns, waste seeps into every gutter, polluting wells and fountains. The very thing that should sustain life instead becomes a slow poison. So you drink ale, all day, every day. It dulls, hunger warms your belly, and keeps you from collapsing. Of course, not everyone brews well. A careless hand leaves too much barley husk or ferments too little, and suddenly your ale has turned sour. But even sour ale is better than dysentery, You drink anyway, pinching your nose. Imagine a world where hydration always comes with risk, where every gulp is a small gamble against your own stomach. Nobles enjoy stronger spiced wines, imported if possible. They sip from goblets at banquets toasting to health with irony thicker than the drink itself. But peasants rarely see wine. For them, it's ale day in and day out. In some villages, ale brewing is the duty of women, who tend pots of bubbling mash as carefully as others tend bread ovens. Brewing becomes as routine as baking an endless cycle of grains, water, fire, and fermentation. The smell of yeast clings to everything, to homes, to clothes, to your very breath. When you laugh, your teeth stained from poor hygiene, the sour scent of ale lingers in the air. It is the perfume of survival, the aroma of necessity. You can't escape it. Even children stumble about slightly tipsy from their breakfast drink, though the alcohol content is low enough to keep them from outright drunkenness. Ironically, drunkenness is still common. Stronger ale circulates at festivals, and some men overindulge staggering through muddy streets while neighbors shake their heads. Hangovers are brutal in a world with no painkillers. But for many, ale is worth the risk. It numbs hunger. It dulls pain. It makes the bleakness of life a little softer. And who can blame them? You think of modern water bottles, clean sealed, sparkling with condensation. Here such purity is unimaginable. You'd give anything for a sip of something fresh, cold, and safe. Instead, you swallow another mouthful of warm flat ale and tell yourself it's better than dying. So the mugs pass, day after day, from hand to hand, lips to lips. The children drink, the elders drink, and you drink too. Because in this world, survival has a taste, and it tastes like barley. You hear the scratching before you see it, a faint scuffle in the rafters, claws scraping wood tails flicking in the shadows. Then comes the squeak sharp and piercing, followed by the flutter of straw as something darts across the floor. Rats. They're everywhere, constant companions in the medieval night, and they bring with them an army of fleas. You clutch your cloak tighter, trying to ignore the movement in the corner. The rats don't just steal food. They spread sickness with every step. Their fleas bite, itching at first, then swelling. You scratch until blood beads under your nails, but the relief never lasts. The bites burn and sting, and worse, they carry diseases you cannot see. Historians still argue whether medieval people connected rats directly to plague or whether they blamed only the air, the stars, or even divine punishment. But to you sitting here with vermin scratching inside the walls, it's clear something foul rides in with them. The smell tells part of the story. Rats leave droppings everywhere on the rushes, spread across the floor, inside the grain sacks, even on bedding. At night, you feel their tiny paws scurry across your legs searching for crumbs. Children cry out in fear, swatting at them, but nothing keeps them away. Cats help, yes, but even the best hunter can't stop the tide. Rats breed faster than you can kill them, multiplying until they own the house as much as you do. It isn't just homes they infest. In towns, rats swarm through marketplaces, gnawing at hanging meat, darting under tables, in taverns, even nibbling wax from candles. They are bold, unafraid of humans, because humans are everywhere. And where humans live, food follows. The line between settlement and infestation blurs until they're one and the same. You toss a pebble at the corner and hear the scrabble of retreat, but only for a moment. They'll return. They always do. Their fleas cling to your ankles, tiny legs tickling against skin before stabbing sharp mouthparts into flesh. The itch spreads maddening as you try not to claw your own skin raw. And when fever follows, a week later shivers buboes swelling black in the groin and armpits, you know it wasn't just an itch. It was death's whisper. The great plagues ride on these creatures. You've heard the stories. Whole villages gone silent, doors barred with no one left alive inside. Priests toll bells endlessly, gravediggers stagger with exhaustion, and still the rats scurry untouched by the sickness they deliver. They slip through alleys, over ships' ropes, into storerooms, always carrying death. And people whisper that it is God's wrath that no man can escape. Yet the truth might be simpler. It's a flea, no bigger than a crumb, riding on the back of a rat in your own home. You scratch at your arm, the skin, red and irritated. Beside you, your neighbor mutters charms, hanging sprigs of rosemary and sage by the window to keep out disease. Another burns incense, choking the air with smoke to drive away bad vapors. And still, the rats watch from the shadows, whiskers twitching as if amused. Think of it today, we shudder at a single mouse in the pantry. In this world, a dozen rats in one room is normal. Children chase them with sticks. Adults stomp them beneath boots. And still the scratching continues. You live with them the way you live with rain or cold, constantly unwillingly, but inevitably. And so tonight, you curl under your blanket straw, rustling ears tuned to the sound above. You pray the fleas bite someone else. You pray the shadows stay still. But the truth is harsh rats own the night, and you are merely their guest. The night air is heavy, and you shift uncomfortably on your straw bedding. Something else gnaws at your mind. Something every medieval household must contend with. Where does all the waste go? You glance at the corner of the room, where a battered clay pot squats like a silent threat. The chamber pot. By day, it sits tucked away, but by night, it becomes a grim necessity. You shuffle over, careful not to trip, and use it in the dark. The smell rises instantly sharp and sour, filling the room, already thick with smoke and sweat. There is no flush, no clean water swirling things away. Only a pot waiting to be emptied in the morning. And when morning comes, the task is dreaded, carrying the reeking burden outside to toss it into the street or ditch. Historians still argue whether people cared about the filth accumulating below their windows or simply accepted it as part of daily life. In towns, it's worse. Imagine narrow cobblestone streets, homes pressed tightly together, and above you, windows opening with a creak. A cry of warning might come gardy-loo in some places, or a local equivalent, but often there's no warning at all. A splash follows, and suddenly you're drenched in your neighbor's waste. Urine and dung mingle with mud pooling in gutters trickling downhill until it joins the river. Children play nearby, their bare feet splashing through puddles that should never exist. The smell is constant, thick as a blanket you can't escape. Visitors from cleaner lands describe medieval towns as stinking pits, where even churches reek of the waste thrown against their walls. Perfumes and incense mask some of it, but nothing truly hides the stench of thousands of chamber pots emptied daily. Richer homes try for more dignity. Privy's essentially wooden seats built over pits offer privacy and a direct drop. Castles boast garderobes, small rooms that jut from the walls, waste falling through a chute into the moat below. But even these are far from sanitary. Imagine strolling by a fortress only to see refuse trickling down its walls. The moat, rather than a barrier to enemies, becomes a cesspool breeding disease and stench alike. The buzzing of flies is the soundtrack to this life. They swarm over everything: food wounds and certainly waste. At night, you swat at them half asleep, the sound of wings constant in your ears. Their presence is more than annoyance. They carry sickness, landing on bread after visiting dung. You eat anyway. What choice do you have? And yet life continues. People laugh, trade, and feast in towns where waste flows underfoot. Children learn to leap over streams of filth. Vendors shout above the smell, and lovers whisper in alleys where the air stings your nostrils. It is all normal. Survival dulls disgust. You think of modern plumbing, clean bathrooms, flushing water soap by the sink, the luxury of privacy, the miracle of hygiene. Here, none of it exists. Instead, you live in a world where waste rains from above, where chamber pots overflow, and where the line between indoors and outdoors blurs under the weight of stench. Tonight, as you drift asleep, the chamber pot sits quietly nearby, its contents ripening in the smoky air. You pull your cloak tighter, burying your nose in the wool, and pretend you don't notice. Because in the Middle Ages, you don't escape waste, you live with it day after day, as unavoidable as the cold itself. The crackling fire fades low, and with it comes the silence of another cold medieval night. But not everyone in this world lies alone under a rough wool blanket. Tonight you hear laughter drifting through the village. Wedding bells have rung, vows have been spoken, and two people, often little more than children, are bound together for life. Marriage in the Middle Ages is rarely about love. It is about property alliances and survival. For peasants, it may mean combining fields and labor. For nobles, it means power, land, and political leverage. But what shocks you most is not the practicality, it is the age. Girls as young as 12 or 13 are led to the altar veils trembling as they step into adult life far too soon. Boys, often only slightly older, stand stiffly beside them, trying to look like men, while still figuring out how to hold a plow. You imagine yourself at that age, suddenly told you are a spouse. Childhood games vanish overnight. Dolls are traded for babies. Laughter for labor, innocence for duty. And yet, to medieval families, this is normal. Life expectancy is so short that waiting until 20 to marry would seem reckless. Parents want grandchildren before death claims them, and marriage is the surest path. Historians still argue whether the Church's rules, setting minimum ages and discouraging clandestine unions, were widely enforced, or whether communities simply followed their own customs. The wedding itself is not glamorous. Peasants gather in a small church, or even outside the priest, mumbling Latin few understand. Afterward, there's a feast of bread, cheese, and ale. If you're lucky, maybe some meat. Music drifts from fiddles or drums, and guests dance in the mudskirts and tunics swishing with every step. For nobles, the scale is larger banquets, musicians elaborate garments, but the weight of expectation is heavier too. A noble bride of 13 might be sent to live in her husband's castle, a stranger in a new world, her body expected to bear heirs before she's truly grown. The first night is dreaded. A young girl, barely past childhood, is ushered into bed with a man she hardly knows. Privacy is rare, and sometimes witnesses are expected to confirm the marriage is consummated. The pressure is enormous, the fear even greater. Modern sensibilities recoil at the thought, but in this time it is duty. A household must produce children, and quickly, because children mean labor, lineage, and security. And those children, they arrive fast, often one after another, with little care for the toll on the mother. Many brides are mothers by 14, widows by 20. and grandmothers before their 30th year. The cycle spins endlessly, with little thought for the individuals trapped inside it. Your body is not your own. It belongs to your family, your spouse, your village. Romance does exist, but rarely within marriage. Lovers' tales sung by troubadours speak of forbidden passion outside the marital bed. Inside marriage is often practical cold, even hostile. Some couples learn affection over time. Others live as strangers beneath the same roof. Yet the community expects you to smile at the feast, to bear your role with dignity, whether you are 13 or 30. Picture a noble wedding in a great hall. Candles flicker against stone walls. Tapestries glow with embroidered saints, and the bride, still a child, bows before a husband twice her age. Guests toast, musicians play, and everyone pretends this is joyful. Outside, peasants whisper half in envy, half in pity. The girl's fate is sealed, and her future, however brief, belongs not to her, but to the family name she now carries. You think of modern weddings, white dresses, vows spoken from love, tears of joy. In this world, none of that matters. Here, the wedding ring is a shackle, not a symbol of romance. So tonight, as bells fade and laughter dwindles, a new bride curls beneath rough blankets, shivering with fear and duty. Childhood has ended. And in the Middle Ages, marriage is not the beginning of happiness, it is the end of innocence. The morning sun slants across the village, and you hear the clang of iron long before you see its source. At the edge of the square stands the blacksmith's forge, its fire roaring, its smoke curling skyward. Yet for all its heat, the work produced here is not just horseshoes and nails, it is punishment. The smell of scorched flesh and singed hair lingers faintly in the air, for this is also where justice is served. Medieval justice is swift, public, and often cruel. A thief is caught stealing bread. What happens next is not a quiet trial, but a spectacle. Villagers gather curious and eager as the culprit is dragged to the center of town. There is no court-appointed lawyer, no careful weighing of evidence. Instead, punishment is delivered where all can see. And it is meant not only to hurt the guilty, but to terrify the rest. Historians still argue whether such displays reduced crime or simply entertained the masses, but their brutality is undeniable. Branding is common. The iron, heated until it glows red, is pressed to bare flesh. The hiss fills the air, a sound that makes even spectators flinch. The victim screams, twisting in pain, the stench of burning skin gagging those nearby. The letter burned into the flesh marks them forever: T for thief, F for forger. You imagine carrying such a scar visible on your face or hand, announcing your shame with every gesture. There is no rehabilitation here. Punishment brands not just skin, but identity. The pillory and stocks are other favorites. You're shoved into a wooden frame head and hands trapped, unable to move. The crowd gathers, jeering, throwing rotten food, dung, or stones. Children laugh, dogs bark, and you stand helpless, enduring not only the physical pain, but the humiliation. Hours pass slowly as your neck cramps, your wrists ache, and your pride is stripped away. For villagers, it's entertainment. For you, it's torment. Worse punishments await more serious crimes. Hanging is common bodies swaying in the wind at crossroads to remind all of the price of lawbreaking. Sometimes, the body is left to rot birds, picking at flesh, a gruesome warning to travelers. In cities, executions are staged like theater. Vendors sell food, musicians play, and the crowd cheers as the condemned meets their end. Death becomes not a private tragedy, but a public festival. Torture also has its place. The rack stretches bodies, until joints pop, the thumb screw crushes, fingers hot iron sear flesh. Confessions are extracted not through truth, but through agony. You cannot help but marvel at the dark ingenuity of it all, humans devising endless ways to make each other suffer and calling it justice. Even minor missteps can bring punishment. Gossip too loudly about a neighbor fines or a whipping. Argue with the wrong official stocks. Poach a rabbit from a lord's land, hanging if unlucky. The laws favor the powerful, and the poor bear the brunt. Justice is not blind. It sees clearly who has land, money, or noble blood. And yet, villagers accept it. Punishment is spectacle, a reminder that order exists, however cruelly enforced. People gather not only out of fear, but fascination. Children watch with wide eyes, learning what not to do. Adults whisper about the condemned, speculating on their sins, secretly relieved it is not them. You think of modern courtrooms, judges in robes, lawyers arguing verdicts debated. Here it is, simple crime, punishment, pain. No lengthy appeals, no questions of fairness. Justice is written in scars, broken bones, and hanging bodies. Tonight, as you curl into your smoky hut, you cannot shake the sound of sizzling flesh, the sight of jeering crowds. Justice in this world is not about balance. It is about fear. And as long as fear keeps people in line, the blacksmith's fire will never go out. The bells toll faintly in the distance, their sound somber, heavy with warning. You shuffle along a dirt path, eyes drawn to a figure approaching from the opposite side. A cloaked man hobbles slowly, face partly hidden, but the soft metallic jingle gives him away. It is the sound of the leper's bell. In the Middle Ages, leprosy is one of the most feared conditions imaginable. The disease leaves skin mottled numb, sometimes ulcerated, and faces twisted by lesions. To most medieval minds, it looks like sin made flesh. A person with leprosy is considered cursed, marked by God for some hidden failing. Fear spreads faster than truth. And so, those diagnosed are pushed away, cast out of homes, families, villages. Their new identity is exile. The bell is their warning. A leper must carry it, ringing softly to alert others of their approach. Townsfolk scatter mothers, pull children close, vendors cross themselves, and doors slam shut. The message is clear. You are unclean. You are dangerous. You are not one of us. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed leprosy was as contagious as plague, or whether the stigma was more spiritual than medical. But the effect is the same. Fear creates walls higher than any castle. For many, life continues only in leper houses, small communities at the edges of towns. Here those cast out live together, surviving on charity and prayer. Churches sometimes sponsor these settlements, offering food and alms in exchange for prayers. Yet the life is bleak. You are trapped among others, suffering the same fate, watching faces and limbs slowly distort while the outside world pretends you no longer exist. Imagine being forced into one of these communities. You were once a farmer, a craftsman, a mother. Now you wear a hood to cover sores, carry a stick to keep distance, and depend on handouts to survive. Your body betrays you with numb fingers that can no longer grasp tools, with wounds that fester because you cannot feel the pain until too late. Each day is a slow erosion of identity. The church preaches that lepers carry Christ's suffering, that caring for them brings salvation. Some nobles donate land or money to leper hospitals, proudly boasting of their charity. But charity often comes with disgust. Food is tossed from a distance, contact avoided, and prayers spoken hurriedly, as though kindness might invite contamination. And yet not all lepers fade into silence. Some travel bells ringing, begging openly in markets despite the glares. A few even find roles as professional mourners hired to walk in funerals as living reminders of mortality. Their very presence is a sermon this could happen to you. The smell follows them everywhere, a mix of unwashed skin rotting wounds and herbs used to cover decay. Flies swarm, attracted to open sores, buzzing around faces that try desperately to maintain dignity. Children sometimes throw stones, shouting insults, daring each other to touch and run away. For the leper, humiliation becomes as constant as pain. You think of modern hospitals, sterile wards, doctors in gloves and masks. Here none of that exists. Here leprosy is mystery and terror. No cures, no antibiotics, only exile. You can't help but feel the weight of loneliness pressing against your chest, imagining yourself standing in the cold, ringing a bell that makes the world scatter like frightened birds. Tonight, as you lie down again, on straw, you hear that faint jingle, echoing in your dreams. The sound is not just a warning, it is a lament. For in the Middle Ages, the leper's bell tolls not only for disease, but for the death of belonging. The rooster crows faintly outside, but you hardly stir. Your body is heavy, not from rest, but from exhaustion that never seems to lift. You drag yourself upright and catch a glimpse of your reflection in a pewter plate. Dark circles hollow your eyes, your skin pale and drawn. In the medieval world, fatigue is not a passing inconvenience. It is a constant shadow fed by hunger, illness, and superstition. When your body fails, the remedies offered are rarely comforting. Physicians, or those who claim the title, lean heavily on the teachings of Galen and the balance of humors. If you are listless, perhaps your blood is too thick. If you collapse, perhaps your bile is too high. The cure is predictable, bleeding purging, or some foul concoction brewed from herbs. And if that fails, then prayer. Always prayer. Historians still argue whether common folk placed more faith in medical theory or in holy relics, but for the sick, desperation blurs the difference. You rise unsteadily and shuffle toward the small wooden church at the village center. Inside, candles sputter, and a priest stands ready with vials of holy water and a reliquary said to contain a saint's finger bone. People believe such relics hold miraculous healing powers. You kneel whispering prayers, touching your lips to the cold metal, hoping the saint will take pity. Around you, others mutter, two mothers, begging for children's fevers to break, men clutching at swollen joints, elders too weak to stand. The church is not only a place of worship, but of medicine, a hospital of the spirit when the body falters. For those who can't reach relics, charms and amulets take their place. A scrap of parchment with scripture tied around the neck, a pouch of herbs worn close to the heart, or even the skin of a snake carried in the hope of warding off evil spirits. You tuck one such charm under your tunic, its leather cord scratching your chest. You know it may not help, but doing nothing feels worse. Home remedies abound, though their effectiveness is debatable. A fever might be treated with willow bark, a headache soothed with mint, or an upset stomach calmed by fennel. Yet other cures sound more like curses, swallowing ground earthworms, for cough rubbing sheep dung on wounds, or drinking mixtures laced with lead. Desperation makes every option seem possible, even as it poisons more than it heals. In towns, apothecaries offer shelves lined with jars and powders, saffron, cinnamon-crushed pearls, each one priced beyond a peasant's means. Nobles can afford them, sipping spiced tonics and syrups sweetened with imported sugar, while the poor scrape together onion poultices, and prayers. The divide between rich and poor is as stark in medicine as it is in food. The sickbed itself is a misery. You lie on straw lice, crawling freely, the air thick with smoke and unwashed bodies. Someone places a damp cloth on your forehead, but the water is drawn from the same bucket that horses drink. You close your eyes trying to block out the itching, the stench, the endless hacking cough of the person beside you. In this world, recovery feels like a miracle, and death feels like a neighbor who never stops visiting. When illness strikes hard, plague, fever, ague, whole families vanish. Villages, empty fields lie fallow, and churches toll their bells endlessly. Survival becomes a lottery, and you wonder whether your charm or your prayers tip the balance. You can't shake the feeling that medicine is less about healing and more about hope, an attempt to believe in control where none exists. You think of modern pharmacies, rows of painkillers, antibiotics, vaccines, ready to prevent disaster. Here, none of that is even a dream. Here, sickness lingers unchecked, a shadow in every hut, a cough in every room. You sip another bitter draught of herbs, gagging at the taste, and remind yourself, if you survive, you'll swear it worked. If you don't, no one will bother arguing. The candle sputters, casting dim light across the cramped room. You pull the blanket tighter and whisper another prayer into the smoke. Because in the Middle Ages, when your body fails, medicine is not science. It is ritual faith and the stubborn hope that tomorrow, somehow, you'll still be breathing. The wind howls outside, rattling the wooden shutters, and you pull your cloak tighter. Tonight, the cold is sharper, and the silence feels heavier. Then, carried faintly on that wind, comes the toll of a bell, slow, deliberate, mournful. It is not the call to prayer or the hour's mark, it is the death bell. In the Middle Ages, death is never far away. You live with it daily, in childbirth, in sickness, in famine. But when it strikes, the rituals are both familiar and unsettling. A neighbor's child has died, and the family rushes to prepare the body. There is no embalming, no preservation. The corpse must be buried quickly before decay sets in. You stand by the smell already creeping into the air, earthy and sweet, unsettling in its finality. The body is washed, though often with the same water used for clothes or livestock. Sometimes herbs are scattered to mask the smell, rosemary, lavender, or simply fresh rushes. The corpse is dressed in its best clothing, though for peasants that may mean a patched tunic rather than finery. Coins are pressed into the eyes or hands, not to pay Karen, but to keep the lids closed lest the dead stare accusingly at the living. The village priest arrives muttering Latin prayers that few understand. His voice is low, rhythmic, like a chant designed more to calm the living than to aid the dead. Candles flicker, casting long shadows against the rafters, and the children shiver. Death for them is both familiar and terrifying. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly accepted death calmly, or whether they simply had no choice but to grow numb to its constant presence. Outside the grave is dug by neighbors' hands blistering from the frozen earth. The coffin, if there is one, is rough-hewn. More often, the body is wrapped in a shroud, bound tightly with rope, and lowered into the ground. The priest sprinkles holy water. The crowd murmurs, "Amen," and dirt begins to fall. The sound, dull thuds of earth against cloth, is one you cannot forget. It is the sound of finality. For nobles, death is staged with grandeur. Tomb effigies are carved chantry chapels, built priests hired to sing endless masses for the soul. Funerals become displays of wealth as much as piety. But for the poor, The grave is shallow. The prayers brief the memory soon swallowed by the needs of survival. And yet fear lingers long after burial. Ghost stories spread easily. Some say the dead return, restless, if not properly buried. Others whisper of corpses sitting up of moans, rising from fresh graves. To ward off such horrors, villagers place stones in mouths, drive stakes through bodies, or scatter seeds in graves, so spirits are too distracted to rise. You imagine walking past the churchyard at night, seeing shapes move in the shadows, hearing whispers carried on the wind. Sleep would not come easily. The smell of death clings even when the body is gone. Clothes of the deceased are often burned possessions distributed, though some fear these objects carry misfortune. A widow covers her hair. Children are warned not to speak of the dead too often, lest they invite spirits to listen. Death shapes not only the body, but the living community that must adjust to its absence. You think of modern funerals, flowers, polished coffins, quiet cemeteries lined with neat stones. Here there is only dirt wood rope and prayers muttered into the cold. The body vanishes quickly, but the memory lingers woven into tales told by firelight. Tonight, as you hear that death bell toll again, you shiver. Another soul has passed another grave, dug another reminder that in the Middle Ages, death is not a rare event. It is the rhythm of life itself, as constant as hunger, as ordinary as sleep. You wake to the faint smell of smoke and herbs, the kind that clings stubbornly to woolen cloaks and lingers in drafty halls. Outside, the village stirs uneasily. Whispers drift from door to door. Someone is ill again. Not just a cough or a fever, something worse. And with sickness comes fear, and with fear comes suspicion. The culprit, according to many, is not rats or fleas, but witches. When crops fail, when children sicken, when cows give sour milk, someone must be blamed. It is easier to accuse a neighbor than to accept that life is random and brutal. So you watch as heads turn toward the lonely woman at the edge of the village, the one who mutters to herself and gathers herbs at twilight. Superstition is thick in the air. Wells are said to be cursed, poisoned by spells. A child's rash becomes proof of evil, a sudden storm the mark of sorcery. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in witches with fiery conviction, or whether fear simply made them convenient scapegoats. Either way, the results are the same: accusation, trial, punishment. The accused is dragged into the square, her hair tangled, her eyes wild with terror. Villagers gather quickly. Nothing draws a crowd like fear. A priest declares that her soul must be tested. Sometimes it is as simple as tossing her into water. If she sinks, she is innocent, but dead. If she floats, she is guilty and doomed. Either way, the outcome is grim. Other times, she may be pricked, with needles searched for a witch's mark, a mole, a scar, any blemish that could be called unnatural. The smell of incense thickens as prayers are chanted. You can almost taste the smoke on your tongue, bitter and choking. The accused pleads, her voice cracking, but the murmurs of the crowd drown her out. Fear has already sealed her fate. Some whisper that even listening to her is dangerous, that her words could curse those who hear them. Not all witch trials end in death, but many do. Hanging is common, burning less so in this period, but remembered vividly when it occurs. The fire consumes not only flesh, but dignity, reducing a life to ash as villagers watch in grim fascination. For them, it is justice. For you, it feels like madness. And yet witchcraft is not always a crime. Some healers are respected, their herbs trusted, their charms sought after in desperate times. The line between wise woman and witch is thin, shifting with the mood of the community. One day, you are called upon to heal. The next, you are accused of cursing. Survival depends not only on knowledge, but on luck and reputation. Children watch wide-eyed as the spectacle unfolds, clutching their mother's skirts. They learn quickly, do not be different, do not be strange, do not attract attention. Conformity is protection. Uniqueness is danger. You shiver, realizing how fragile your own safety is in a world where accusation is enough to destroy you. You think of modern explanations, bacteria, viruses, spoiled grain. Today, you might call it science. Here it is, sorcery. The leap from sickness to witchcraft is small when knowledge is scarce and fear abundant. That night, as you huddle by the fire, the smell of smoke still clings to your hair, your cloak, your skin. It is not the smoke of hearth fires or cooking pots, but of something darker fear turned into flame. You cannot shake the image of the accused, her cries fading into crackle and ash. Because in the Middle Ages, sickness rarely came alone. It came with whispers, curses, and the hunt for witches. The wind whistles through the gaps in your wooden shutters, carrying with it the sound of hooves pounding on the muddy road. You glance outside and see riders thundering past banners snapping in the air. The Lord's men are gathering again, for war or for show you cannot tell. But for you, it means only one thing: taxes. In the Middle Ages, taxation is relentless. Every harvest, every trade, every head of livestock is counted, measured, and squeezed for value. The king demands his share, the local lord demands more, and the church takes tithes on top of it all. You clutch your meager coins, knowing they will vanish before you can buy salt or cloth. Historians still argue whether medieval taxation was truly crushing or merely inconsistent. But to those living under it, the weight feels unbearable. The tithe to the church alone is a tenth of everything you earn, or rather, everything you grow. Grain eggs, wool honey, all must be carried to the priest's storehouse. You watch as neighbors lug sacks of barley on bent backs, the priest nodding solemnly while servants tally every item. The irony bites deep. The church preaches charity, yet takes food from the hungry, stacking barns high while peasants starve. Still few dare complain. To resist is to risk excommunication. And in this world, being cut off from the church means being cut off from salvation itself. Then comes the Lord's demand. He sends his men to your fields, counting sheep and oxen, measuring harvests, and scribbling tallies. Taxes may be taken in coin if you have it, but more often they are in kind grain, livestock, or labor. You might spend weeks working the Lord's land instead of your own, your family growing hungrier as you toil for someone else's table. And beyond taxes lies rent. Land is rarely yours. You are a tenant bound by feudal duty, owing rent to your overlord. Miss a payment and eviction looms. Not that eviction means moving to another house. It means starvation, wandering, or worse. The earth beneath your feet is not your own, and every seed you plant is shadowed by someone else's claim. The burden does not stop at lords and priests. There are tolls on bridges, markets, even roads. Want to cross a river? Pay. Want to sell your grain? Pay. Want to grind your wheat into flour? Use the Lord's mill and pay again. Your life is measured in dues, your labor consumed by hands that never touch the soil. The smell of sweat and damp wool fills the tax hall as villagers crowd together, clutching their offerings. Chickens squawk, goats bleat, children whimper as their parents hand over food they cannot spare. The officials' wax tablets scratch with every note, tallying burdens that will never shrink. You feel the weight in your gut, a mix of hunger and despair. and yet somehow you endure. After the tax collectors leave the village, gathers around fires sharing what little remains. You laugh bitterly with neighbors trading jokes about the Lord's appetite or the priest's overflowing cellar. Humor becomes resistance, laughter, the only shield against helplessness. You think of modern taxes, complicated forms, paycheck deductions, grumbles about bureaucracy. Here the process is brutally simple: give or lose everything. Survival is not about wealth, but about staying just above the line of ruin. So tonight, you hide the last of your grain beneath loose boards, praying no official finds it. Your children sleep beside you, stomachs growling, while the barns of church and castle overflow. Because in the Middle Ages, taxes are not a system. They are a hunger-devouring peasants, one tithe, one toll, one coin at a time. The night is restless again, broken by shouts from the edge of the village. You step outside the chill, biting your skin, and see torches flickering in the dark. A group of soldiers trudge past armor clanking boots splashing through mud. The Lord has called them to service, but for peasants like you, war is not something distant. It arrives at your door, demanding food labor, and sometimes your life. Medieval warfare is constant. Lords quarrel over land, kings wage campaigns for crowns, and foreign invaders sail in with banners snapping. Armies march across fields, trampling crops, seizing livestock, and leaving hunger behind. For peasants, the arrival of soldiers often means devastation worse than any enemy raid. Fields are stripped bare, homes looted, and villages burned. You clutch your cloak, praying they move on without noticing your small hut. For those forced to fight, the experience is brutal. You are handed a spear or a makeshift pike, told to stand in a line, and ordered to face trained knights clad in steel. The clash as deafening swords ring against shields, arrows whistle through the air, and screams rise as men fall. The stench is unforgettable, a mix of sweat, mud iron, and blood. You stumble through it, ears, wringing eyes wide, clutching your weapon more like a walking stick than a blade. Knights dominate the battlefield. Mounted on powerful horses, they thunder into ranks of peasants, lances lowered, armor gleaming. Against them, your wooden shield feels like paper. One strike can crush bone, one charge scatter a dozen men. And yet lords insist peasants march, for bodies are cheap and easily replaced. You are not a soldier, you are fodder. Historians still argue whether commoners ever stood a chance or were simply forced into hopeless sacrifice. Sieges are no kinder. Imagine cowering inside a walled town as catapults hurl stones. Towers burn and supplies dwindle. Days stretch into weeks, hunger gnaws, and disease spreads faster than arrows. Corpses pile in the streets. Food vanishes, and the enemy waits patiently, knowing starvation will break you before steel does. When walls finally fall, the slaughter is merciless. Mercy is rare plunder, inevitable. The aftermath of war is its own nightmare. Villages smolder. Fields lie fallow, and survivors scavenge ruins for scraps. Famine often follows battle, and sickness follows famine. Children wander barefoot among ashes. Women wail over the fallen, and men stagger home with missing limbs or haunted eyes. The scars last long after swords fall silent, and yet war is glorified. Troubadours sing of noble knights, tapestries depict shining victories, and lords boast of honor. But you know the truth. Glory is mud in your mouth, the weight of a dying friend in your arms, the gnawing hunger when harvests are gone. You wonder how many tales are written by those who never lifted a blade. The smell of smoke drifts into your hut, even now, carried by the wind from a nearby camp. Horses neigh, armor rattles, and voices carry into the night. You close your eyes, praying the soldiers do not raid your home, praying tomorrow brings peace. But peace is a stranger here, never staying long. You think of modern war jets, bombs, missiles. It is terrifying in scale, but distant for many viewed through screens. Here, war is in your field, your village, your home. You cannot switch it off. You can only endure. So tonight, you lie awake, heart pounding, with every hoofbeat ears tuned to the sounds of soldiers beyond the trees. Because in the Middle Ages, war is not just history. It is the air you breathe, the fear you carry, and the shadow that never leaves. The rooster crows again, but instead of hunger or war, today's burden is toil. You drag yourself into the fields, the earth damp beneath your bare feet, and join the endless rhythm of peasant labor. In the Middle Ages, survival is not about cleverness or invention. It is about backbreaking work from dawn until dusk, day after day, with no end in sight. The plow waits heavy and awkward, its wooden frame pulled by oxen that snort clouds into the cold air. You grip the handles, mud sucking at your boots, and push with all your strength as the blade carves the earth. Each step jostles your arms, every furrow a battle. By midday, your shoulders ache, your palms blister, and your stomach growls for food you cannot spare. The land gives grudgingly demanding sweat before it yields even a handful of grain. Peasants' lives are ruled by the seasons. Spring means plowing and sowing. Summer brings weeding and tending. Autumn demands frantic harvesting. And winter offers only hunger and patchwork repairs. There are no weekends, no holidays beyond the few saints' days granted by the church. Even on feast days, chores linger. Animals must be fed water, fetched fires kept alive. The cycle is relentless, like the ticking of a clock you can never stop. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly worked harder than modern laborers, but there is no denying the sheer physical weight of their days. The smell of sweat and damp wool hangs in the air as men, women, and even children bend to their tasks. Children chase crows from fields, women hoe weeds, and men cut hay with scythes that whistle dangerously close to their legs. Injuries are common, a misstep, a deep cut, an infection. Without modern medicine, even a small wound can claim a life. And still, the work continues because stopping means starvation. At night, the aches remain. You collapse onto straw bedding muscles, stiff fingers curled from gripping tools all day. The smoke from the hearth stings your eyes, but you barely notice anymore. The sound of snoring fills the hut as your family sleeps exhaustion, pressing everyone into silence. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and the day after that. Leisure is rare but precious. On holy days, you gather with neighbors, drinking ale, dancing clumsily, laughing despite everything. For a few hours, the burden lifts, and you remember you are human, not just labor. Music fills the air, children chase one another, and for a moment joy breaks through the mud and sweat. But when the sun rises again, the plow waits, and so does duty. The irony is sharp. Much of this work is not even for your own survival. A portion of every harvest goes to the Lord, the church, or the tax collector. You work until your body breaks, only to hand over the fruits of your labor to others. The scraps that remain must feed your family and somehow stretch through the hungry gap of late winter when stores run low. You think of modern jobs, 8-hour shifts, weekends, labor laws. Here, the concept is laughable. Work is not a schedule. It is existence itself. If your body moves, you work. If it stops, you die. So tonight, as your muscles throb and your stomach rumbles, You whisper a prayer for rain or sun, whichever the crops demand. Because in the Middle Ages, your life is chained to the soil, and the soil, indifferent and unyielding, demands everything you have to give. The air in the village feels heavier tonight, not with smoke or hunger, but with whispers. You notice groups of people gathering at the crossroads, eyes flicking nervously, voices lowered to conspiratorial tones. Then you see it, the flicker of torches in the distance, the shadowy movement of riders approaching. Fear prickles along your skin. It is the Lord's taxmen, or worse, the church's inquisitors. Religion saturates every corner of life in the Middle Ages. The church is not just a building or a priest. It is the rhythm of existence, dictating how you pray, how you marry, how you work, even how you eat. Yet with this power comes suspicion. To question, to doubt, or even to misunderstand can brand you a heretic. And in this world, heresy is not a debate, it is a death sentence. You recall stories whispered by firelight. A man who claimed bread and wine were not truly the body and blood of Christ burned at the stake. A woman who preached visions from God, condemned and silenced. Sometimes it is not even belief, but politics. To defy a bishop is to risk being branded heretical, no matter your faith. Historians still argue whether the church truly believed it was defending souls or simply guarding power. But for you, the threat feels terrifyingly real. The inquisitors thrive on fear. They travel from town to town, cloaked in black, demanding confessions. You might be asked if you believe every word of doctrine. If you hesitate, if your answer stumbles, suspicion sharpens. Torture follows. The rack creaks, thumbscrews bite, and flames threaten. And in agony, almost everyone confesses truth or not. The church claims a victory for orthodoxy, while another soul is broken in silence. But suspicion is not limited to heresy. Even daily life is saturated with religious control. Lent demands fasting meat forbidden, except on special days. Feast days punctuate the year, not for joy, but for obedience. Priests inspect marriages' births, even wills ensuring all is blessed, sanctified, and taxed. You cannot escape. Even in death, your grave rests on consecrated ground only if the church allows it. Without that blessing, your soul is thought to wander lost. The air inside churches is thick with incense, the sweet choking smoke clinging to your cloak and hair. Statues stare down, candles flicker against painted saints, and priests chant in Latin you do not understand. You kneel, murmur prayers, and pretend comprehension, because to question is unthinkable. The very sound of your doubt could draw suspicion. Yet beneath the fear, there is comfort too. Bells mark time prayers, give rhythm, holy days break monotony. The church provides bread for beggars, alms for widows, healing for the sick, though always with strings attached. And despite everything, people cling to faith because it offers what the mud hunger and war cannot hope. You think of modern religion, plural, varied, argued over freely. Here there is one faith, one truth, one path. Stray from it, and you risk everything. So tonight, as the torches pass your door and voices mutter about heresy, you huddle close to the fire, whispering prayers under your breath. Not because you fully believe, but because silence might be mistaken for rebellion. In the Middle Ages, faith is not only salvation, it is survival. The wind whistles sharply through the thatched roof, rattling loose stalks of straw, and you shift beneath your rough woolen cloak, trying to ignore the cold. But tonight, the chill is not your biggest fear. A sound echoes in the distance, a sharp bark followed by the howl of wolves. You freeze. In the Middle Ages, The wilderness is never far away, and it is filled with teeth claws and eyes that gleam in the dark. By day, the forest looms at the village edge like a wall of mystery. Towering oaks and pines stand so close together that light barely pierces their canopy. By night, the woods are terrifying. Wolves prowl the undergrowth, boars crash through the bracken, and bandits lie in wait for travelers foolish enough to pass alone. The wilderness is not romantic or peaceful. It is hostile, dangerous, and relentless. Historians still argue whether peasants exaggerated the threat of wild animals or whether packs of wolves really did menace villages regularly. Either way, the fear is real, and it shapes how you live. Wolves are the most dreaded. They slip silently through snow eyes glowing in moonlight, teeth flashing white. When winters are harsh and food runs scarce, they creep into villages dragging off sheep or even children. The church preaches that wolves are symbols of the devil, cunning and merciless. Farmers build higher fences, light fires at night, and keep weapons near their doors. But the howling in the dark is a reminder that no barrier feels secure enough. Boars are no safer. Imagine walking through the woods spear in hand when a tusked beast barrels from the underbrush. Its charge is unstoppable, its squeal piercing its tusks sharp enough to rip flesh. Hunters speak of bravery, but many limp home with shredded legs, if they come home at all. Bears haunt the colder regions. Their sheer size and strength make them legends in themselves. Stories spread of bears raiding beehives, tearing apart livestock, or wrestling hunters into the dirt. For peasants, the bear is a symbol of raw wilderness, the strength of nature against the fragility of man. But animals are not the only danger. The forest shelters people to outlaws who have fled taxes, laws, or vengeance. Bandits lurk along roads, waiting for merchants, pilgrims, or even simple villagers. They attack in groups, knives, flashing, demanding coins you do not have. Sometimes they kill for the thrill, leaving bodies rotting in ditches. You clutch your cloak tighter, shuddering at the thought of meeting them in a lonely wood. Superstition makes the wilderness even darker. Tales of werewolves, spirits, and demons swirl with every gust of wind. Villagers swear that witches hold Sabbaths deep in the forest, that fairies lure wanderers astray, that goblins whisper lies until travelers walk in circles forever. At night, fires flicker between trees, and you cannot tell whether it is hunters, thieves, or something worse. You keep your distance, but your imagination gnaws at you just as sharply as fear. The smell of the woods clings to memory, damp leaves, wet fir smoke from fire pits hidden beneath branches. The sounds are worse, branches cracking wings, fluttering overhead, the eerie silence before a predator strikes. Every sense sharpens when you step into that darkness. You are prey as much as hunter. Even in daily life, the wilderness presses against you. Wood for fires must be fetched, berries gathered, game hunted. Each trip into the forest carries risk. You never go alone, if you can help it, and even then prayers fall from your lips with every step. You carve charms into sticks, leave offerings at crossroads, do anything that might convince the spirits or beasts to spare you. And yet the forest provides. Without it, there would be no timber, no game, no forage. It is enemy and ally, both a contradiction you must accept. You learn its paths, respect its dangers, and never grow careless. Because carelessness means death. You think of modern wilderness, hiking trails, campsites, rangers patrolling for safety. Here, no such protections exist. The forest is raw, ungoverned, alive with danger. It is not a place of leisure, but of survival. So tonight, as the wolves howl again, you press closer to the fire. The flames crackle, sparks leap, and your family huddles together, eyes wide, ears straining. Beyond the firelight, the dark presses close filled with unseen threats. And you understand, with a shiver, that in the Middle Ages, the wilderness is not simply outside your village. It is always at your door. The church bells toll faintly in the distance, their sound rolling across the damp fields, calling the faithful to yet another Mass. You pull your cloak around you, feet sinking into the mud of the village lane, and join the slow procession toward the stone church. Attendance is not optional. To skip it is to risk being branded suspicious a heretic or simply ungrateful for God's mercy. In the Middle Ages, religion is not a private belief. It is the scaffolding of life, rigid and inescapable. Inside, the air is heavy with incense. Thick smoke curls upward, filling your nose with a sweetness that turns cloying. Candles flicker in iron holders, wax dripping onto the cold flagstones. The priest stands at the altar in embroidered vestments, speaking in Latin. Few understand the words, but that hardly matters. The ritual is not about comprehension, it is about obedience. You kneel when others kneel, stand when others stand, cross yourself when others do. The rhythm of Mass is drilled into you long before you grasp its meaning. The centerpiece of the ritual is the Eucharist, the bread and wine that the priest declares to be Christ's body and blood. You watch as people file forward, mouths, open eyes, lowered, receiving a sliver of bread on their tongues. For many, it is the holiest moment of their week. For you, it is also a reminder of power. Only the priest holds the chalice, only he pronounces the words that turn common bread into miracle. Without him, the gateway to salvation is closed. The church calendar dictates your year as firmly as the seasons do. Advent, Lent, Easter, Pentecost, and a litany of saints' days break the monotony of toil. Fasting is frequent. For weeks at a time, meat is forbidden, and you subsist on fish beans and coarse bread. The discipline is meant to purify the soul, but hunger gnaws just the same. On feast days, the mood shifts. Markets bustle. Bells ring joyfully, and food and ale flow more freely than usual. These rare bursts of celebration are what many cling to brief respites from endless labor. Confession is another weight. You kneel before the priest, whispering sins into his ear. Perhaps you cursed. Perhaps you coveted your neighbor's ox. Perhaps you skipped a tithe. Each sin is tallied, each one a debt. The priest assigns penance prayers, fasts, or small acts of charity. If you refuse, or if your sins are judged, grave punishment escalates. Public shaming, fines, even excommunication await those who stray too far. The church does not only govern souls, it governs behavior, ensuring obedience to its order. The architecture itself enforces awe. High stone arches loom above you. Stained glass windows filter light into red and blue patterns across the floor. Saints stare down from wooden carvings, their painted eyes both comforting and watchful. The message is clear. God is immense eternal, and you are small, dependent, fragile. That sense seeps into your bones as constant as hunger. And yet belief is not only fear. For many, faith brings genuine comfort. Pilgrimages to holy shrines are made with hope that miracles will occur. Mothers pray to saints for healthy births. Sailors beg protection from storms. Peasants ask for rain in drought. The church offers answers where none exist, weaving meaning into the chaos of war, famine, and disease. Whether the promises hold true or not, they ease the burden of not knowing. Still doubts lurk. You wonder if every coin you hand over in tithes truly goes to God or simply builds the bishop's new hall. You question whether relics the knucklebone of a saint, a splinter of the true cross, a vial of holy tears are truly what they claim. But such thoughts are dangerous. To voice them aloud is to risk suspicion. Better to bite your tongue, kneel, and whisper the prayers you've memorized since childhood. The sensory weight of church lingers long after you leave. The incense clings to your clothes. The Latin chants echo in your ears, and the vision of the crucifix hangs in your mind as you return to the muddy lane. You carry both comfort and unease, both belief and doubt. In this world, you cannot separate them. You think of modern religion, plural debated, chosen freely, or not at all. Here, there is no choice. One church, one path, one salvation. To stray is not only spiritual danger, but physical risk. So tonight, as the bells toll again, you kneel by your straw bed and whisper a prayer you half believe. Not because you are certain of its truth, but because to stop would feel like stepping off a cliff into nothing. In the Middle Ages, religion is both chain and shelter, both burden and balm. And you live your life pressed tightly between the two. The village square is louder than usual, filled with shouts, laughter, and the rhythmic thump of drums. You step closer, drawn by curiosity, and find yourself in the middle of a feast day. At last, the monotony of labor breaks, and for one night hunger war and fear are forgotten. Yet even joy in the Middle Ages is never simple. Celebration is both wild and dangerous, a release of tension that often spirals into chaos. The feast begins with food, whatever can be spared. Roasted meat sizzles on spits, the fat dripping and popping into the fire. The smell is intoxicating, a rich aroma so rare it makes your stomach growl painfully. Tables groan under wheels of cheese loaves of bread, pots of stew. Ale flows freely, its sour bite, warming bellies and loosening tongues. For peasants, such abundance comes only a few times a year, so they gorge until their stomachs ache, knowing tomorrow's meal may be meager again. Music fills the air. Minstrels pluck lutes, and fiddles their melodies quick and sharp. Drums pound, feet stamp, and soon the square erupts into dance. The dances are not graceful. They are stomping, whirling, laughing affairs, with skirts flying and boots kicking mud into the air. Children dart between legs, chasing each other, their shrieks blending into the music. Even the elders smile, clapping along, letting themselves forget their aches for a moment. But celebration carries shadows. Ale dulls caution, and arguments flare. Two men grapple, rolling in the mud, cheered on by the crowd. Women pull them apart, only for another fight to break out nearby. Drunkenness is excused on feast days, but the bruises linger. And sometimes worse happens, knives flash. Debts are remembered, grudges resurface. The same fire that warms joy can ignite violence. The church watches uneasily. Priests warn against excess, reminding revelers that gluttony and drunkenness are sins, yet they know better than to forbid it entirely. People need release, or despair will consume them. So the priest blesses the feast, then retreats, leaving the crowd to their revelry. Some say the church's unease lies deeper, that such festivals echo older pagan rites, celebrating the turning of seasons with food fire and wild abandon. Historians still argue whether medieval festivals were Christian at their core, or pagan traditions repainted with holy names. Masks and costumes appear as the night deepens. Men dress as animals, women as saints or devils, children as spirits. The line between sacred and profane blurs. Fires burn high sparks rising into the night sky, and shadows dance on the walls. Someone sets off fireworks of their own crude, making sparks, bursting from burning resin smoke filling the square. The crowd cheers eyes wide as though the stars themselves have fallen. The smells overwhelm you: roasting meat, spilled ale sweat smoke, the sharp tang of wood ash. The press of bodies is suffocating, warm and chaotic, but alive. You taste salt on your lips from sweat sweetness, from stolen honey cakes, bitterness, from ale gulped too quickly. Every sense is alight, overstimulated, pulled in a dozen directions at once. Yet in the midst of laughter, reminders of hardship slip through. A beggar tugs at your sleeve, hand outstretched. A child coughs violently in the shadows, ignored while the music plays. Even joy cannot fully mask suffering. For peasants, the feast is both escape and cruel reminder proof of how rarely life feels full. As the night wears on, the dances grow wilder, the songs bawdier, the jokes sharper. You find yourself laughing, spinning, stomping, heart racing. For a brief moment, you forget the taxes, the hunger, the fear. You are only here alive among others who share your burdens. And that in itself feels like a miracle. But morning always comes. The fires burn low, the music fades, and bodies slump against walls, snoring in the mud. The feast's abundance is gone, replaced by hangovers, sore muscles, and the dull ache of returning reality. The fields still wait, the Lord still demands, the church still tolls its bells. You think of modern festivals, carnivals, concerts, fireworks lighting up the night. Here joy is rare, brief, and tinged with danger. But it matters all the more for that. Without it, despair would swallow whole villages. So tonight, as you crawl back into your smoky hut, the echo of drums still thrumming in your ears, you whisper thanks. Not for abundance, not for peace, but for the fleeting gift of laughter. In the Middle Ages, even one night of joy is a treasure worth remembering. The dawn is gray and damp, the kind of morning that makes your bones ache before you even rise. You drag yourself from the straw, stretch stiff limbs, and shuffle outside. Today is not about farming, or fasting, or feasting. Today is about justice, or rather, what passes for justice in the Middle Ages. The village square is already crowded. Men, women, and children jostle for space eyes fixed on the raised wooden scaffold at its center. Rough-hewn beams creak under the weight of rope and iron chains. A cart rattles up carrying prisoners, bound in fetters, their faces pale and hollow. Fear prickles through you, for in this world, punishment is public brutal and designed to etch terror into memory. The first sentence is flogging. The man is stripped to the waist, his back already crisscrossed with scars from past whippings. The whip cracks sharp as thunder tearing skin, splattering blood into the dirt. The crowd murmurs some jeering, others grimly silent. Children peek between fingers, learning early that pain is authority's language. The smell of sweat and iron fills your nostrils, the sound of each lash sinking into your stomach like a stone. Then comes the stocks. A woman accused of theft is forced into the wooden frame, her head and hands locked in place. She cannot move as villagers hurl rotten vegetables, mud, and insults. Some laugh, some spit, some even strike her. The punishment is not only pain, it is humiliation, stripping dignity until she becomes a spectacle. Hours later, she will be released, her body bruised, her spirit broken. But not all punishments end with release. Hanging is common, swift and final. The rope creaks, the condemned gasps, the crowd holds its breath. The body jerks, then stills tongue, protruding eyes, bulging. The silence afterward is thick, broken only by the priest's muttered prayer. For crimes judged worse, Treason, heresy, the end is even darker. Dismemberment, burning, or worse. Spectacle is the point, a warning to all who watch, obey or suffer the same. The church plays its role too. Heretics are paraded in shame, forced to recant, sometimes executed in flames that crackle and roar. The smell of burning flesh is unforgettable, searing itself into memory, lingering long after the fire dies. Historians still argue whether these punishments were truly effective in deterring crime or whether they simply bred more fear. But for the people gathered, the message is clear. Power is not gentle. Power is pain. Superstition twists justice further. Ordeals by water or fire are common. A man accused of lying may be forced to plunge his hand into boiling water. If it heals cleanly, he is innocent. If it festers, guilty. A woman accused of sorcery may be bound and thrown into a pond. If she drowns, she is pure. If she floats, she is condemned. Logic bends. Cruelty thrives, and truth is swallowed by spectacle. The crowd participates eagerly. For them, punishment is entertainment as much as lesson. Ale flows, vendors sell bread and pies, children dart between legs. Some cheer at each lash, others gossip about the condemned. You stand among them, uneasy, wondering how quickly the crowd would turn if your own name were ever called. The sensory details are impossible to ignore. The stink of sweat and mud, the crack of wood against flesh, the clank of chains, the cries that start loud and weaken into sobs. You taste bile at the back of your throat, yet cannot look away. The human mind is curious, horrified, and fascinated all at once. Afterward, the scaffold stands empty, blood staining the boards, flies already buzzing. Life resumes as though nothing happened. Farmers return to fields, children chase chickens, merchants haggle in the market. Yet the memory lingers in every mind. The image of the whip, the rope, the fire becomes a ghost that haunts daily life, whispering reminders of obedience. You think of modern justice trials, lawyers, prisons. Here, guilt is decided quickly, punishment swiftly delivered, mercy rarely considered. Justice is not blind. It is brutal, public, and merciless. That night, as you crawl into your straw bed, you hear echoes of the crowd's jeers and the crack of the whip. You wonder what truly keeps order in your world: law, faith, or simply fear. In the Middle Ages, justice is not a shield. It is a spectacle carved into flesh, meant to remind you that survival depends not only on work and prayer, but on obedience to powers that rule without pity. The season turns, and with it, the rhythm of life shifts once more. The fields outside the village are quiet. The last sheaves of grain already stack the air sharp with the scent of frost. Winter presses in like a clenched fist, and you brace yourself for the long months ahead. In the Middle Ages, winter is not a quiet retreat. It is a season of survival testing, whether the hard work of the year has been enough to keep you alive. Inside the hut, smoke curls from the hearth, clinging to the low rafters, filling the air with a haze that burns your eyes. The fire is weak, fed with scraps of wood and dried dung. Its warmth is precious, but it never quite reaches the corners of the room. You pull your cloak tighter, the rough wool itchy against your skin, and glance at the stores stacked in baskets and barrels. Grain beans, salted fish, dried apples. The sight is both comfort and anxiety. If the winter is long, will it last? Meals grow monotonous. Porridge thick with barley bread, coarse with rye broth, thin as water. Meat is a luxury reserved for feasts or stolen from snares in the woods. The smell of cabbage hangs constantly pungent and sour, mingling with smoke. Children complain of hunger, even after eating their bellies, never quite full. You chew slowly, trying to trick your body into believing it has had enough. Illness thrives in the cold. Smoke fills lungs, coughs echo through huts, fevers flare without warning. You wrap blankets around shivering children, murmur prayers, and hope the sickness passes. Remedies are few and unreliable: herbal teas, poultices of onion or garlic charms hung by the bed. Sometimes they work, sometimes not. Death hovers closer in winter, its footsteps muffled in the snow. Outside, the landscape is harsh, but strangely beautiful. Frost glitters on bare branches, snow crunches beneath boots, and the fields lie silent under their white shroud. Wolves creep closer to the village, their howls chilling the night. You stoke the fire higher, clutching a stick as though it could keep the beasts at bay. The wilderness feels sharper in winter, more desperate, as though nature itself conspires against you. Despite the hardship, winter brings moments of togetherness. Families huddle close around fires, telling stories, singing songs, sharing laughter that defies the cold. Villagers gather in the hall for festivals like Christmas, where the church blesses the season with candles, hymns, and the rare gift of joy. Ale flows, bread is shared, and for one night, the fear of scarcity lifts. Even in darkness, celebration flickers like a candle against the void. The sounds of winter etch themselves into your mind: the crack of frozen wood underfoot, the groan of rafters under snow, the muffled quiet of fields buried in white. You feel the sting of wind on your cheeks, the numbness in your fingers, the heaviness of boots clogged with ice. Every sense reminds you of the fragility of life here, how survival depends on preparation, resilience, and luck. Historians still argue whether medieval winters were truly harsher during the so-called Little Ice Age, or whether memory simply exaggerates the cold. But for you, huddled by a dying fire, it hardly matters. Cold is cold, hunger is hunger, and each night stretches long as eternity. And yet winter is not only threat, it is pause. Fields rest, tools are mended, hands find time for crafts. Women spin wool, men carve wood, children chase each other through drifts of snow. Life slows, shifts inward, becomes smaller, but no less vivid. The cycle of toil yields briefly to the cycle of endurance. You think of modern winters, heated homes, electric lights, stocked pantries. Here survival is uncertain every snowfall, a reminder of how thin the line is between comfort and death. The modern world may complain of gray skies. In this one, gray skies mean another day of hope that the stores will last. So tonight, as the fire crackles low and the wind rattles the shutters, you wrap your cloak tight and whisper a prayer. Not for abundance, not for miracles, but simply for endurance. In the Middle Ages, winter is not a season to enjoy. It is a gauntlet to survive. The story quiets now, the noise of whips bells and hungry wolves fading into the soft hush of falling snow. You are no longer in the square, no longer in the smoky hut, no longer clutching at your cloak with fear in your chest. Instead, picture a wide field, empty, and still the frost, glowing pale beneath a moon that drifts lazily behind thin clouds. Each breath hangs in the air, each footstep muffled, and the world feels gentler, as though even time itself has slowed. The hardships of medieval life, the hunger, the punishment, the fear begin to fade at this hour. All that remains is a sense of stillness, of people huddled close around fires of prayers whispered not in fear, but in gratitude for another day survived. You might imagine yourself sitting there with them wrapped in wool, the warmth of the fire slowly easing the ache from your bones, the murmur of voices soft and comforting. Let your body relax, as though you too have laid down, on straw bedding, the weight of the day finally lifted. The crackle of fire is steady, the shadows on the walls long and slow. Outside, the snow continues to fall, covering fields, forests, and graves alike with the same quiet touch. All are equal in this silence. All are gathered into the same calm night. Breathe deeply now, letting the cold air sharpen your senses, then fade, then soften. The sounds drift away, the images blur, and soon only the quiet remains. Sleep is near, and with it a gentler world than the one you've walked through tonight.